Welcome to Crescent City Crime, dear listeners. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Brian.
Welcome to everybody who is listening to us, whether you've been here before or if you are a new person. We, of course, thank you so very much. We just really love this. I love seeing our numbers grow bit by bit.
We really enjoy having you listening. We really enjoy talking to you. This is a lot of fun for us.
We are on all of the social medias. All of those links will be in the show notes. And we want to let y'all know that we consider you supporting the show just by listening to us. But if you would like to further support the show, tell your friends. And of course,
Tell your enemies, especially your enemies.
we appreciate any 5-star ratings and reviews on whichever podcasting platform you listen to us on. Speaking of, if you're not subscribed to us, why the heck aren't you? Because we are everywhere, including on YouTube. If you find us on YouTube, we appreciate any subscriptions to the channel, any likes on the videos, even nice comments. Those are great too. And of course, you can subscribe to us on Patreon. That link will also be in the show notes. So, these are other ways that you can support us. The other ways you can support us is if you keep, like that Instagram post, slide into my DMs for that sticker giveaway that is still going on, folks. So you have to contact me. Okay. Now, I promised everybody a mystery. And a mystery you shall have. And no, we're not going to solve it by the end of the episode, Brian. I'm very sorry to say.
No, of course not.
Of course not. No.
I mean, several times, mostly times when I was a little kid, I'd watch some show or listen to some show about a mystery, and I would expect the people who made the show to solve the mystery by the end of the show. And was, once again, here we are. This is how you set yourself up for disappointment when you listen or watch something. Having expectations. Okay?
Well, I am not promising that to solve this. In fact, I'm sorry to say, you'll probably have more questions at the end of it than you do at the beginning.
Which is normal.
It is normal.
Yeah.
So across Lake Pontchartrain to the north of New Orleans lies St. Tammany Parish. And within that parish is the rural town of Lacombe, Louisiana. And this town is 50 miles north of New Orleans. And on Friday, July the 14th, 2017, it started out as a typical day in that town, but it ended with a woman dead and the house she lived in burned to the ground. Now, nearly 6 years later, the circumstances surrounding the crime and suspects are still murky, and of course, the case remains unsolved. And this is the story of Nanette Krentel. In 1994, Steve Krentel ran 2 businesses, a picture frame shop and a scuba diving shop. Nanette applied for a job at one of those places, and Steve hired her. This is how they met. At the time, Steve was married, but he really liked Nanette. At first, he kept his relationship with her professional, but he did wind up leaving his wife for Nanette. Now, he had a 2-year-old son named Justin that he had from his first marriage. Nanette did her best to be a good stepmom. Steve's businesses closed in 1997, and this is when he started a career as a firefighter. And eventually he became the fire chief of his department. That's pretty impressive and a lot of work.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So, Nanette started teaching preschool. Both were happy with their careers and their finances were in a good position. And in the year 2000, they purchased 100 acres of land and they built a house. The area around the house was gated and there was only one way in and one way out.
One way out.
Yes. Well, Steve's cousin was their closest neighbor. So this was the type of property that, even though you had a neighbor, you had a swath of trees in between you and your neighbor's house. So you couldn't like see each other's houses.
No, sounds like a relaxing place to live.
Probably, yes. Probably very quiet. But of course, this is the type of place where you had to drive to get anywhere.
Oh yeah.
Okay. At 2 p.m., Steve's cousin called him at work and said, "Your house is on fire. I can see the flames above the trees." Steve thought that this was some kind of joke, of course. He didn't want to believe that his house was on fire. Who would want to believe that? Nobody would want to believe that their house is on fire.
Yeah, we kind of experienced something like that with the neighbor at that time.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
But we didn't even know what had happened until we got back home.
Well, the incident I'm talking about happened before that. It was when it's like I see smoke coming from the back. I see smoke coming from the back of the guy's place, and it turns out it's the guy's place on fire. And then I let them know, and then I grab my fire extinguisher and I head down, and I'm running down their alley. And remember, there are people at the AutoZone.
Oh yeah, I do remember that now.
With like a parking lot between us and the AutoZone. The people at AutoZone were yelling at me, "Get away from there! Get away from there!" And as I was about to go past the windows to go in through the kitchen, I hesitated. I stopped when I heard people yelling at me, and then all of a sudden, backdraft comes right through the window.
Mm-hmm.
So it was good that I hesitated. Then I realized that the fire had already escalated to more than I could manage with the fire extinguisher, and the place burned down.
Yes, it did, but there was nobody injured in that fire, right?
No, the guy was working on a car. He was a street mechanic.
Yes, I do remember.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So Steve assembled his firefighting crew and they went over there. Now, Steve said that during the ride, he called Nanette's cell phone and his house phone over and over again, but they kept going straight to voicemail. When they arrived at the house, the entire structure was totally engulfed by flames. Like this, again, like the story you just told, Brian, this was way beyond a fire extinguisher. Okay, this is one of those raging inferno type of fires that you never want to see. Okay.
Nope.
Steve could see that both his car and Nanette's car was in the garage. So he believed that Nanette was still in the house. And firefighters did indeed find her body on the floor of the master bathroom, and a gun was found near her body as well. When Steve talked to Nanette's father and sister, he told them that he thought that maybe Nanette had run into the house to gather the family pets that they had, but she had become disoriented and then just succumbed to injuries from the fire and died. But her family and friends were not convinced. They did not believe that she couldn't evacuate the house. Okay. Keep in mind, this is a woman who's married to a fire chief. Now, I would think that a key point in a household like that would be fire safety. Understanding how to evacuate your pets, evacuate yourself, etc.
Yes. Yeah, everyone should have a plan.
Everyone should have a plan. That's correct. And everybody should have fire extinguishers as well. I would think if you're in a fire chief's house, that's one thing that you would definitely find is fire extinguishers and smoke detectors, right?
Yeah. You would expect that. That's part of the life of a firefighter, and to be a fire chief, you have to live, sleep, eat, and breathe that stuff for a very long time. So, one would think that you have your own house in order there.
Exactly. And this fire happened during the day. Nanette was fully awake. It's not like she was asleep. And, sometimes when people are asleep during a house fire, they do wind up dying because they're inhaling the carbon monoxide and the smoke, and they don't know it because they're asleep. Okay, this was not that scenario.
Yeah, that's your biggest danger in a fire is carbon monoxide inhalation.
Right. So, and they also believe that she would have called for help. I mean, obviously, that's another thing you would do is call 911.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. So the call for the house fire did not come through emergency services. Remember that. This was a family member who lived next door to the property that called Steve personally and said your house is on fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very interesting tidbit there.
Now, another interesting tidbit, Brian, how long do you think it took the fire investigators to release the property back to Steve?
How long would I think? 12 hours.
Only 12 hours after a fire investigation? I mean,
I've seen it done sooner than that.
Oh, well, this property was released back to Steve just 2 days after the fire. The family walked the property looking for anything that could be salvaged, and while they were doing that, they cleared the debris. Due to the intensity of the fire, the house was totally gone, just burned down to the foundation. There was no frame left. There were no walls, windows, roofs, nothing. It's just burned down to the ground.
Wow.
Okay. The news kept reporting that Nanette Krentel had died in a house fire until the coroner announced that her cause of death was actually a single gunshot wound to the head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to happen during a fire. Fire's not going to cause that. And like, say, for example, even if around, let's see, the only conceivable way that a fire could cause that is if you had a round in the chamber of a firearm and the fire cooks off the round that's sitting in the chamber. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then, because the round is going off in a chamber, the gases from the small explosion, the gunpowder ignited by the primer, okay, which in this case would be the primer that gets ignited, and then the gunpowder explodes. The bullet goes forward. The gases travel through the barrel, through the rifling grooves, causing the bullet to spin so that the bullet can actually travel once it exits the barrel. And the pistol's barrel is aligned with her head.
So
the odds of that are astronomical.
Right,
okay?
It's like 1 in a million or something.
And a box of ammunition, if a box of ammunition is cooked off in a fire, the bullets are going to travel nowhere because they're not going off in a pressurized chamber with a barrel to assist it to gain velocity and actually travel. No, the shell casing will explode. The bullet goes nowhere.
Yes.
What's been seen in a few movies that I declare to be fantasy, like True Lies, good movie, fun movie, but the part where rounds of ammunition fly all over the place because they were cooked off in a fire, that's pure fantasy. That's a fantasy world where the laws of physics are different.
Are you saying that James Cameron lied to us?
So yeah. Astronomical odds on that one. That's deliberate.
Right.
Sure, that's the sure sign of an arson.
Funny you bring that up because while I was investigating, however you want to put this, Tracy on the case, right? I learned that firefighter arson is a thing. There's a certain amount of firefighters out there who do cause fires themselves. Now, just want everybody to kind of put a pin in that. Okay. So, so a lot of the debris had been cleaned out, so any evidence that might have been found was gone in this homicide investigation. Okay, this is when the police started their homicide investigation. One thing that police were unable to uncover was that there had been over 30 guns in the house, but the guns were burned so badly that they couldn't really be identified. And when Steve was asked about the guns, he explained that he and Nanette collected them and both of them were experienced shooters. So Nanette was a woman who was also proficient with firearms. She was experienced. She knew firearm safety, all those things that you should know if you're a gun owner. Okay. The bullet that was found in Nanette's could not be matched to any of the guns found in the debris. And it's not because those guns might not have been used, it's because the guns were so badly damaged they couldn't have been tested. Okay. So, remember that they found a gun near Nanette's body. And the sheriff was leaning towards it being a suicide. And I think he really wanted it to be a suicide. But a lot of her friends said there's no way Nanette killed herself. She was not that type of person. She was not suicidal.
Yeah, the fire part also cast, great doubt upon that too as well.
Exactly.
She shot herself on the head and then she set the place on fire.
And and if she did kill herself, why go through all the trouble of making sure that the house was totally destroyed?
Yeah, doesn't add up.
Okay.
No.
And to top it off, the coroner did not find any smoke or soot in Nanette's airways. And you can't start a fire if you're dead. And even if you are, let's say that the fire was going and you just took like one or two breaths, there would still be microscopic traces in your airways. Okay. Like any of the tiniest inhalation of soot and smoke would leave some sort of evidence. But there was none of that. So you can't start a fire if you're dead. And there was no way to test for evidence of a struggle or a fight with an intruder because everything was gone. But testing of remaining debris revealed that gasoline had been used to accelerate the fire. The gasoline was poured all through the living room and the master bathroom. And remember that Nanette was found dead in the master bathroom, which was right next to the master bedroom. Okay?
Yes.
So we are going to come back for more of this mystery after this quick break. And we are back. So, Steve had installed cameras all around the property. All of the footage was backed up to a DVR, and there had been a huge monitor in the house so they could see everything that the cameras picked up. There was no way that somebody could enter or exit the property without being recorded. The remains of the DVR were sent for testing. Like, they even sent it to the FBI lab, which has, more sophisticated equipment than a lot of state labs do. But they were not able to retrieve anything that was useful. And it was also revealed that the DVR itself had been completely doused in gasoline. Almost as if whoever set the fire knew about the DVR and wanted to make sure it was destroyed.
Wow, wow. What a coincidence.
Obviously, the person who had set the fire knew the layout of the house and knew that the DVR would have caught the murderer on camera. All of this was being reported in the news, minute by minute, pretty much. And investigators looked into Steve. When they looked into Steve, it was revealed that he had been having not just one, but two. That's two marital affairs. Now, keep this in mind that Steve cheated on his first wife with Nanette. Then he cheated on Nanette with two other people.
Yeah, and what one of the things that can follow the M that can often follow the marital affair is murder.
That does happen.
The more women, the more affairs, the more likely it becomes.
Now, according to Steve, he and Nanette had worked past those problems. But according to Nanette's family, she had told them she wanted to leave the relationship. And again, all of this was being reported in the news, and everyone, and I do mean everybody, thought that Steve did it. If you talk to anybody about this at the time, they're like, Steve totally did it. Steve did it. Steve did it. Must have been Steve. And yes, I know it's so frustrating because in these cases, you do believe it is the husband. And a lot of times it is the husband. But we're going to get there. I'm going to explain to you all why Steve is not in jail, basically.
Yeah, theoretically, it could even be the woman involved in the affair, one of the women involved in one of the affairs.
It could have been, but Steve, in an effort to clear his name, volunteered to take a polygraph test. He did not have an attorney present when the questions were asked, and he passed the test. But does that even mean anything? Because you can fool a polygraph
It's
test.
not really admissible in court because there are pathological liars out there who can very calmly tell what in their minds, their truth without a problem, without creating any particular pattern that would indicate something improper to the polygrapher.
Right. But it wasn't just a polygraph test that cleared him, mind you. Cameras at the firehouse provided an alibi for him. He was seen on those cameras throughout the day of July 14th, 2017. Several co-workers also accounted for his presence at work up until they went to the fire. And the FBI plotted Steve's cell phone. This is basically where they can track your movements through your phone. Like if your phone is with you, they can tell if you were really where you said you were or not.
Or you could just leave your phone where you conveniently want to be, quote, found, located.
That's true, but remember, he was on camera throughout the day at work, and his co-workers accounted for him. So that's a lot of evidence to try to manipulate.
True.
Okay. Now, you might be thinking, though, he has a solid alibi, right? He was at work. How could he possibly have done it? Well,
yeah, him.
No.
The alibi covers him. Right.
Well, but there's always a but, right?
Yeah.
A friend of Nanette's was talking to her on Facebook Messenger the night before. They had been chatting back and forth for over an hour, and then the chat just stopped. No goodbye, I'll talk to you later, gotta go, whatever. She was just gone. And there is no physical evidence that Nanette was alive on the morning of July the 14th. There's just Steve's word for it, okay? So, if Steve did it, he likely killed her the night before the fire. And somehow managed to set the fire some kind of way remotely. I don't know, like maybe, like you take a candle and like you wrap some twine around it, you leave it soaking in gasoline, that kind of thing.
Or got someone else to do
it. Maybe not.
As I said, the alibi covers him, but not anyone associated with him necessarily.
So, when investigators looked into Nanette's bank statements, they saw that her card had been used at a nearby McDonald's. The charge on the card came in around 10 a.m., and it was used at the drive-thru. When investigators looked at the footage, it was really grainy and unclear if it was Nanette in the vehicle. When her family was shown the footage, they couldn't tell if it was her or not. There was no clear shot of anyone's face in the vehicle. Okay, so it might not have been Nanette at all. All right. The sheriff was somehow convinced it was her.
Mm-hmm.
But if her friends and family couldn't identify her, how could the sheriff identify her?
Right.
Okay. And this footage has never been publicly released. But because of Steve's ability to have some sort of alibi, the sheriff publicly cleared him. Like he held a press conference and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So This led to the part where investigators start combing through Nanette's emails. She had sent multiple emails to friends stating that she was afraid of her stepson Justin. She believed that he was dangerous and she did not want to be alone with him. She thought that he had a bad temper and that he was capable of great violence. Now, when Justin turned 18, he started buying his own guns, and he would have more than one with him at all times. Now, Nanette did not believe, or she thought he was not responsible enough to have them, even though, like, legally he could purchase rifles and shotguns.
Mm-hmm.
But it caused her great concern, and I would say that if somebody like Nanette, who, again, going back to her experience with guns,
Mm-hmm.
right, she would understand if somebody was responsible enough to own one or not. Okay, so
Yeah, it takes someone experienced and knowledgeable about firearms to be able to tell that.
right now, apparently Steve had told Justin that he wasn't allowed in the house unless Steve was also there. But later on in interviews, Steve claimed the opposite. He said that Justin was just an angsty teenager, that Nanette was blowing things out of proportion, and that everything was just fine. So you can draw your own conclusions here as well, right?
Yes.
Now,
So we have another suspect here, obviously.
but at the time of the fire, Justin was in Virginia, so he probably didn't do it. Now, I'm gonna get to the last name on our list, though. Steve's brother Brian. No relation to you. You're not Steve's brother. Brian had been in and out of jail a lot. He had been arrested over 36 times.
Wow.
Okay. He had multiple assaults on his record as well. So a lot of his arrests were for assaults, various types of assaults. And Brian hated Nanette for some reason. Like, he just would always talk badly about her. He would say nasty things about her to his parents. Basically, anybody that would listen, he would say, I don't like Nanette, for whatever reason. In 2015, Brian called Steve in the middle of the night asking for help pulling his car out of a ditch. Steve and Nanette got up out of bed, out of their house, in the middle of the night to go help him.
Wow.
Okay? But they weren't able to get the car out of the ditch. And while they were there, a state police officer saw them. He offered assistance, but it turned out that Brian had drugs in the car. He was under the influence of alcohol, and he was on parole. Okay, so he's arrested again. And Brian was very angry about this. And gee, wouldn't you know, Brian? He blamed Steve and Nanette for his arrest because they didn't get to him fast enough. Not because he had drugs in the car.
Right.
Or that this was his fourth DUI arrest. Fourth DUI arrest. Okay?
Yeah.
Not
a good idea to go run an errand for someone and have drugs in the car.
Well, if it's late at night and if he drove his car into a ditch and he was drunk, he was probably just, for whatever reason, he might have been leaving a bar. He might have just bought those drugs and was trying to go home. Who knows? Who cares? Because he was in jail for 2 years, or he was sentenced to 2 years, okay? During that time, he sent Nanette threatening letters. In a letter that was sent 2 months before the fire, he wrote that he was going to rape her, kill Steve, and burn the house down. Nanette turned over the letters to law enforcement, and she begged for Brian to not be released. But what she didn't know was that Brian had already been released in September of 2016 for good behavior. Do you believe that?
Threatening people through the mail, writing these letters is good behavior.
Yeah, apparently, no. This letter was sent after
Oh,
he was
right.
released.
Oh,
She didn't know that he had been released. Nobody told them. He was on house arrest to finish out his sentence, okay? He was living with his parents. Their house was about 15 miles away from Steve and Nanette's. In response to this, Steve installed more cameras, security doors, and Nanette always made sure that she was armed. She was trying to feel safe, and she said to a friend that as long as she was inside the house, she was safe. She really believed this.
yeah.
Okay. While Brian was on house arrest, he was wearing an ankle monitor. This ankle monitor was supposed to track his movements and monitor his blood alcohol level. The parole officer told Steve and Nanette that Brian's monitor would send an alarm out if he left the perimeter set by the monitoring company. So in theory, he could not get into Steve and Nanette's house, right? You would think,
you
right?
would think he wouldn't. No.
Okay, but we're going to come back to that. I want everybody to remember this. A few months before Nanette's death, she found a cigarette butt on the walkway to the house. Now remember, their house, their property is gated. So somebody somehow had climbed the fence or was maybe let in, and there was just a cigarette butt on the walkway. Nanette and Steve did not smoke, so it did not belong to them. Okay. And a little while after that, she sees a man hanging out on the edge of her property. She wasn't able to identify him. She did get a photo, but it wasn't a clear shot. She sent this picture. She texted it to her dad. And, you know, she told Steve about it. He went to check the cameras, but, gee, wouldn't you know it, they conveniently weren't working that day. Amazing.
What a coincidence.
When the camera repair person came out, he told Nanette that there wasn't really a problem with the cameras. The issue was that the cameras had just been turned off.
Oh.
And when Nanette expressed her concerns to Steve, he basically, don't worry, darling, everything's fine.
No.
Okay.
Oh.
Now, 2 months after Nanette's death, it was revealed that Brian's ankle monitor, the part of it where it's supposed to track his movements, wasn't actually turned on.
Oh.
The only part of it that was turned on was the part that was supposed to monitor his blood alcohol. But the tracking part of it just wasn't activated. It just wasn't. Okay? And the parole officer said, well, gee whiz, you know, I got these emails from the monitoring company. We all thought it was turned on. I mean, what a thing to slip through the cracks, eh?
You're not likely, probation officers not likely to, or parole officers not likely to hear about such a problem from the offender with the ankle bracelet on.
No, why would they?
Yeah, you know, of course, these aren't people who try to game the system. No,
never. Why would they do that? Now, Steve had installed cameras at his parents' house, and the footage from the day of the fire shows that Brian never left the house. And this is unfortunately pretty much where the story ends. Nanette Krentel's murder is still unsolved. There's a lot of good suspects, but they all magically have alibis. And the man hanging out on the edge of the property was never identified.
Which leaves open the possibility of a third party that's associated with one of these suspects.
That's true. I keep thinking that, well, the one that I keep coming back to is that if Steve did it, okay, he would have knowledge on how to get a fire to ignite after he had left the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I keep coming back to that. Everybody can draw their own conclusions. I think it was the husband. I think he somehow, maybe he paid somebody. Maybe he somehow did it himself. But all signs point to you, Steve.
Yeah. Sam. It's quite possible Steve found out through his experience and associations as a firefighter over the years, uh, found out who he could count on to do such a thing.
Dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
Yeah, it could be like he may have made casual acquaintance with a drug addict along that career. This happens with some police officers too. They make acquaintance with a drug addict. Could be even someone who they arrested, and they, give them money for drugs here and there to do certain errands for them.
Right, right. Yeah.
And sometimes it's simply nothing more than just cheap labor.
Right.
Kind of like hiring a Latino, whereas generally you could get a drug addict to do favors for you, legal or illegal, cheap, because they, in their minds, they don't have a lot of time to get the money they need to get their fix.
Right.
So the services of a drug addict typically come cheap.
Call a crackhead?
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, that's what one of our idiot state senators that we did not vote for was basically made a political ad and said that, oh, why do you want to call a crackhead? But here's the thing. Crackheads are motivated.
Well, the ad was we're talking about a senator who goes to Washington, D.C., okay? And that doesn't have very close association. That position does not have very close association with like local police departments, okay? So it was a campaign ad where he was looking for...
All right, you were saying, Brian, it's a campaign ad for what?
Okay. In campaign ads, oftentimes politicians will try to score points of supporters by agreeing with them on political topics that have next to nothing to do with the job that they want them to vote for them for, the position. In this case, a U.S. senator. Okay, U.S. senators have very little to do with local police. Okay, but knowing that he has to, rouse up a certain political base here, he decides to bring up defunding the police. Okay, and so he says a joke. He says, "Oh, if you don't like the police, if you want to defund the police and you're in trouble, call a crackhead."
Right.
You see, so it's cheap political points essentially.
Right, but also crackheads are motivated. And I would say that, like, for example, if your car has been stolen, and if you think that somebody who kind of maybe hangs around your neighborhood and you know that they have a substance abuse issue, they might actually be able to help you for a little bit of money.
That's true. Yeah, something stolen from you, and you're pretty sure it's someone that's pretty close in the area, and you think maybe one of these crackheads, if you know one of these crackheads, they might know who did it.
Or a wino. Right. Anybody.
Yeah.
And anybody who hangs out on the street that has...
There are cases where you could actually count on a crackhead to do things. Now, I'm not saying you can trust these people. It's just that there are situations where you can enlist their help and, keep them at arm's length, of course. Not that I recommend doing this, but, things get bad and you think someone can help recover something stolen from you, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. And Well, so Brian, who do you think solved Nanette? I mean, who do you think killed Nanette Krentel? Do you think it was the husband? Or do you think it was the brother? Or do you think that it was possibly somebody that Steve was having an affair with? I know that we're not going to solve this right now, but I would like to hear your thoughts because I think it was the husband somehow.
I think it was the husband as well, because through his experience as a firefighter all that time, he came up with the perfect arson plan
Mm,
that would exonerate himself.
right, right. Mm,
And he made sure that he was seen where he was seen when this went down.
yeah.
He made sure that he wasn't anywhere near there.
Mm. And I always think about how terrible the situation must be for her family and her friends as well. I mean, she was a person she was well loved. That this wasn't somebody who was a drifter or somebody who was kidnapped and not reported missing. This was somebody who had a solid life, solid relationships, etc.
Now, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that after this happened, that he decided to meet with the guy to pay him the additional, pay him additional funds after it was done, and he kills him and he dumps him in the swamp.
Mm. Mm.
This could have been someone who didn't have any local family. Perfect mark for a throwaway guy.
Yeah, that is also a possibility. I mean, and I just want to point out he wouldn't even necessarily have to drive him out to the swamp. I mean, Lacomb's rural. They have a lot of places you can go bury a body and nobody would ever find it out there.
And if it's someone who no one would miss, no one would report missing,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
the body would have to be recovered for any investigation, any possibility of an investigation.
Yes, and like again, more questions than answers at the end of this. Cold cases really do frustrate me. They really do. Of course, there's always going to be cold cases, but unfortunately, not a lot of them have a lot of information. This is probably the cold case that has the most information on it that I was able to find out of any that I've looked at within the state of Louisiana.
Yes, quite. Yeah, there's a few suspects here, but nothing concrete.
Nothing concrete.
All circumstantial.
If only somebody would talk.
Well, if the person who did it is dead, then that's not going to happen.
I know. But I tell you though that thing where the monitoring company didn't turn on the location of the ankle monitor is just it's so stupid. It's so ridiculous.
It could have been. It could have happened because this could have been one of those little Louisiana sweetheart deal contracts.
Oh yeah.
Campaign contributor, and they get the contract, and
They muck it up.
yeah, it's a low bid, and they don't spend much on it.
Mm.
So the service associated with this contract is not going to be very good.
You have a good point there. That happens pretty often. As a matter of fact, it kind of infamously caused the Hard Rock Hotel collapse when they were building it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. A sweetheart deal.
Quite true.
Well, dear listeners, that is our story for the day. Next week, we are going to bring you the story of another corrupt NOPD officer. We're going to be talking about the cocaine king himself, Len Davis.
Len Davis.
Len Davis.
Oh.
Yes, I know you've not heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, I barely knew him.
Well, I'm glad you didn't really know him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, one of those situations where you kind of think you know somebody and you really don't know them. Although I didn't know them closely, I was acquainted.
Well, if you, like I said, if you knew him closely, you would probably wish that you did not know him closely. And don't worry, dear listeners, we will fill you in next week on all of that. So until then, everybody, be safe, be kind. Remember that we're all human beings, and don't park next to vans.
If it's dark, it's dangerous, and you don't feel safe, don't be there in the first place. Even if you concealed carry, putting yourself in danger to use your firearm is a bad idea if it can be discreetly avoided. And if you are talking to law enforcement in an official capacity and are not the victim or the witness to a crime, lawyer up.